They tried to fine me $100,000 without reading the original agreement. It was 9:14 on a Tuesday morning when a black Cadillac tore through my gravel road and crushed the wildflowers beside cabin 4. I was halfway through replacing a cedar railing when the HOA president stepped out holding vanilla notices like she already owned the place. She told me my 10 lake cabins now belonged under HOA control. Said the cops would enforce it if I refused. What she didn't know was simple. Every single person in her subdivision drove across a road my father built with his own hands. And buried inside an old agreement was one sentence that could leave 96 homes without legal access overnight. If you like stories about land, law, quiet revenge, and people standing their ground without backing down, subscribe and stick around. Because this one only gets crazier the deeper it goes. It was 9:12 on a Tuesday morning when the black Cadillac SUV came flying down my gravel road hard enough to throw dust over the dock railings. I was kneeling outside cabin 4 with a cordless drill in one hand and a fresh cedar baluster wedged against my knee. Memorial Day weekend was 3 days away, and every cabin on the property was booked solid. Families from Denver, a retired couple from Kansas, one honeymoon reservation from Texas, the kind of people who came up here for silence. The Cadillac shattered it. The tires ripped across the gravel curve by the gate instead of slowing like every decent person did. One wheel rolled straight through the strip of wildflowers Lena Brooks had planted beside the split-rail fence 2 summers earlier. Yellow petals scattered across the road behind the SUV like somebody had dumped paint into the dust. I set the drill down slowly. People who belonged on this road knew better. The SUV stopped halfway between cabin 3 and the boat ramp. Engine still running, tinted windows black as oil. The driver's door opened first. Vanessa Crowley stepped out, wearing a navy blazer sharp enough for a courtroom and sunglasses that reflected the lake back at me. Her blonde hair was pinned tight despite the wind coming off the water. In one hand she carried a leather folder, in the other a clipboard. Right behind her climbed out Tommy Briggs, the HOA's compliance officer. Tall guy. Permanent smirk. Phone already raised before his boots hit the gravel. He started taking pictures immediately. My porch, my railing, the dock, the cabins, the lake itself. Like he was documenting a crime scene. Vanessa didn't even say good morning. "Mr. Walker," she called, voice carrying across the property. "You'll need to stop all maintenance work immediately." I stood up from the porch slowly, brushing cedar dust off my jeans. "Morning to you too." Tommy ignored me completely. He walked straight toward cabin 4, snapping photos while reading something off his phone. "Exterior modifications undocumented," he muttered. "Unregistered short-term rental structures. Non-compliant signage." I looked at Vanessa. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" She opened the leather folder and pulled out a stack of papers thick enough to choke a horse. "As of last Friday's board vote," she said, "all lakefront properties connected to Lakeside Pines infrastructure fall under full HOA jurisdiction and compliance review." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I glanced past her toward the road winding through the pine trees behind the cabins. 1/2 mile of asphalt cutting through the woods toward the subdivision beyond the ridge. My father built that road in 1982 with 3 borrowed paving machines and every dollar he had left after my mother's surgery. Vanessa had been driving across it for 14 years, and somehow she still didn't know whose land she was standing on. Tommy peeled a bright orange notice off a backing sheet and slapped it directly onto the porch post beside me. "Code violation pending compliance review." The adhesive crackled in the quiet morning air. "You don't put stickers on my property," I said flatly. Tommy stepped back like he wanted the photo more than the argument. He lifted his phone again and captured the notice against the cedar railing. Vanessa adjusted her sunglasses. "You currently owe the association $96,000 $411 in unpaid dues, penalties, and non-compliance fees dating back 3 fiscal years. I stared at her for a second. Then I said, "That's so." She nodded once. "If payment arrangements are not made within 7 business days, the HOA will proceed with liens against all 10 cabins pending transfer of management authority." There it was. Not community standards, not noise complaints, not safety concerns, money. My cabins had been booked nearly solid every summer for the last 4 years. People saw the trucks coming in, saw the paddleboards stacked by the docks, saw the parking area full every weekend from May through September. Vanessa smelled revenue, and now she wanted control of it. Tommy wandered farther down toward cabin 5, photographing propane hookups and porch lights like he was inventorying stolen property. I could hear the lake water hitting the dock pylons behind me. Slow, steady, calm Vanessa stepped closer. "If necessary," she continued, "the sheriff's department will assist in enforcement actions involving unlawful operation of non-compliant rental units." That one was meant to intimidate me. The problem was, I knew Deputy Cole Mercer personally. He'd gone fishing with my father twice before Dad died. I leaned against the porch railing. "You bring the sheriff up here yet?" "Not yet," Vanessa said, "but we will." The wind shifted across the lake, carrying the smell of pine sap and outboard fuel from the marina farther downshore. Tommy came back holding another orange notice. "Cabin 5 marked," he announced. Vanessa gave a satisfied nod like she was checking boxes on a grocery list. Then Lena Brooks' hatchback pulled into the driveway. She froze the second she saw the Cadillac. Lena had cleaned these cabins for 11 years, 62 years old, tough as railroad steel. Raised 2 sons by herself after her husband died in a logging accident outside Durango. But when she saw those orange notices on the porch posts, her face dropped. Vanessa turned toward her immediately. "Mom, this property is under active compliance enforcement," she said loudly. "Any unauthorized business operation conducted here may become subject to investigation." Lena looked at me instead of Vanessa. "Ethan." "I got it," I told her quietly. Vanessa flipped another page on the clipboard. "Mr. Walker has until next Friday to surrender management records, occupancy reports, and financial disclosures related to these rental units." Then she smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind somebody gives when they think they already own something. "We can do this the easy way," she said, "or the expensive way." I looked at the notices, the cameras, the clipboard, the flower bed crushed under her tires, and then I looked past all of it toward the narrow stretch of asphalt disappearing into the trees behind them. 14 years. 14 years of driving across private land without ever asking who owned it. That was the part I couldn't stop thinking about. Not the threats, not the money, not even the lines. Just the arrogance. I folded my arms across my chest. "Well," I said calmly, "I guess we'll see which way it goes." For the first time since stepping out of the SUV, Vanessa looked slightly confused, like she expected yelling, fear, begging, anything except calm. Tommy slapped the final orange notice onto cabin 6 while she studied my face. Then both of them climbed back into the Cadillac. The SUV backed down the gravel curve, tires grinding across the same flower bed a second time, before disappearing through the pines toward Lakeside Pines subdivision. Lena walked slowly onto the porch beside me after the sound of the engine faded. "Ethan," she said carefully, "can they really take the cabins?" I looked at the orange sticker beside my shoulder, then at the road beyond the trees, then at the old gray fireproof lockbox sitting under my office desk inside cabin 1. "No," I said quietly, and for the first time all morning I smiled. "They just don't know it yet." Lena looked at me like she wanted to ask another question, but didn't. She'd known my father long enough to recognize that tone. The quiet one. The one that usually meant somebody else was about to have a bad week. I peeled one corner of the orange notice off the cabin 4 post, then stopped halfway. The adhesive stretched and crackled against the cedar. I left it hanging there. Take the day off, I told Lena. Paid. Ethan, I'm serious. She looked toward the road where the Cadillac had disappeared through the pines. You need anything? Not yet. She hesitated another second, then nodded and headed back toward her hatchback. I watched her leave before walking down the dock toward cabin 1. The lake was calm again. You'd never know a storm had rolled through 20 minutes earlier except for the tire marks cutting through the flower bed. And those bright orange stickers nailed to my property like warning flares. Inside cabin 1, the office smelled like cedar stain, printer toner, and old paper. I shut the door behind me. The gray fireproof lockbox sat exactly where it always had beneath the desk beside my father's leather chair, flat industrial paint. Steel corners scratched white with age. A faded strip of masking tape across the lid in my father's handwriting. Walker Road files. I hadn't opened it in almost 9 years. Hadn't needed to. My father believed in 2 things more than anything else on earth. Concrete poured deep enough to survive winter, and paperwork filed correctly enough to survive people. I crouched beside the box and spun the combination lock slowly. Left, right, left again. The metal latch clicked open with a sound I hadn't heard since the week after his funeral. For a minute, I just looked inside without touching anything. Folders. County maps. Survey stakes wrapped in old newspaper. A stack of receipts held together with a rusted binder clip. Every inch of it smelled faintly like dust and cigarette smoke, even though Dad quit smoking in 1994. I lifted the first folder carefully onto the desk. 1982 road contracts. That road out there had nearly killed him. Back then, the county refused to build access through the ridge because Lakeside Basin was considered too remote for development. No funding. No public infrastructure expansion. Too expensive. So Dad built it himself, took out a second mortgage on the property, and hired 2 paving crews from Grand Junction willing to work weekends for cash. I was 12 years old when the asphalt trucks started rolling through the trees. I still remembered him standing shirtless in August heat beside a steamroller, boots black with tar, screaming measurements over diesel engines. Half the people around the lake thought he was crazy. The other half started using the road the second it was finished. I opened another folder, 1987. Subdivision access negotiations. That one mattered. The developer who built Lakeside Pines had come to our kitchen table, begging for an easement after discovering there was no legal way into the subdivision except through our land. Dad refused him twice. The third time, the developer brought lawyers. Dad still refused. Instead, he signed something else. A revocable access license. Temporary permission. Not ownership. Never ownership. I pulled the original copy from the folder carefully. 12 pages. County seal. Blue notarization stamp faded almost gray. And there, halfway down page 7, was the line I remembered my father reading out loud to me once, after too much whiskey and not enough sleep. License shall terminate immediately upon any claim of jurisdiction, ownership, or adverse interest against Walker family property by license or governing entity. I leaned back slowly in the chair. There it was. The loaded shotgun hanging on the wall for 40 years, and Vanessa Crowley had just walked straight in front of it carrying a clipboard. I heard my father's voice clear as day. Never give people permanent rights if temporary permission gets the job done. Back then I thought he was being stubborn. Now I understood. I kept reading. Every version of the agreement said the same thing in different legal language. No easement. No transfer of ownership, no community road designation, just permission. Permission that could be revoked the second somebody got greedy enough to mistake access for control. Outside the office window, a pickup truck rolled slowly past on the road toward Lakeside Pines. One of the homeowners, probably heading to work, probably had no idea the asphalt under his tires existed Because my father spent 3 years paying off debt to build it, and definitely had no idea the woman running his HOA had just endangered access for every house in that subdivision. I reached for my phone and called the only person I trusted with land documents besides myself, my older cousin Nathan Walker, real estate paralegal in Colorado Springs, quiet guy, meticulous, the kind of man who alphabetized receipts. He answered on the second ring. "Ethan, you remember the road license?" A pause. Then his voice sharpened immediately. "What happened?" The HOA finally crossed the line. I explained everything, the notices, the threats, the liens, Vanessa claiming jurisdiction over the cabins. By the time I finished, Nathan wasn't speaking anymore. He was breathing through his nose the way he always did when he got angry. Finally, he said, "Tell me exactly what words she used." "She said the cabins now fall under HOA jurisdiction and compliance authority." Another pause. "Jesus Christ. She said it in front of witnesses, too." "You record any of it?" "No, not this morning." "That's fine," Nathan said quickly. "Don't do anything yet. Don't threaten her. Don't mention the road. Let her keep talking." I stared down at the highlighted clause on page 7. What if she files? I hope she does. That caught my attention. "Nathan, I'm serious." "Ethan, if she formally claims authority over your land on paper, she triggers the clause herself." Outside, wind moved across the lake hard enough to rattle the dock chains. I looked again toward the road disappearing through the trees. The subdivision beyond it. 96 homes. One entrance. My entrance. Nathan lowered his voice. "Question is, how far is she willing to go before somebody tells her what she's actually standing on?" I folded the license agreement carefully back into its sleeve. Then I looked at the orange violation notice, still hanging crooked, outside cabin 4. And for the first time since Vanessa arrived that morning, I started to wonder if she'd already gone too far. By Wednesday, the letters started showing up. Certified mail, bright green stickers, legal notice, compliance review required. Vanessa wasn't wasting time. The first envelope demanded architectural approval records for all 10 cabins. The second requested occupancy logs going back 3 years. The third accused me of operating unregistered commercial lodging activity within HOA influence boundaries. That phrase told me exactly what this really was. Money. I spread the papers across the kitchen table beside my coffee and read every line twice. Not one document cited a deed. Not one cited an easement. Not one referenced ownership of the road. Everything depended on one phrase repeated over and over. Community infrastructure access. They were trying to build authority out of repetition. The problem for Vanessa was that legal ownership doesn't care how many times somebody says a thing out loud. Outside, another SUV rolled past on the road toward Lakeside Pines. Then another. Morning traffic from the subdivision. Every homeowner using asphalt my father paid for. Every homeowner unknowingly tied to a legal agreement their HOA president clearly had never read. I got my answer Thursday afternoon. Megan Pierce knocked on the office door just after 4. Late 30s, school counselor, lived near the subdivision entrance with her husband and 2 kids. I knew her, mostly because she rented kayaks from me every summer. She stepped inside carefully, glancing toward the road first. "You got a minute?" Sure. She held a folded envelope against her chest. "I probably shouldn't be here." "That usually means somebody absolutely should be there." I motioned toward the chair across from the desk. "What's going on?" She sat down but stayed tense. "Vanessa's been talking about you at every HOA meeting for months." That got my attention. "She says the cabins are hurting property values. Says outside renters are lowering the neighborhood standard." I almost laughed at that. Most of my renters were retired couples and families looking for quiet weekends by the lake. Meanwhile, half the HOA board got drunk enough every 4th of July to launch fireworks sideways off pontoon boats. Megan slid the envelope across the desk. Inside were copies of HOA violation notices, Different addresses, different families, same pattern. One homeowner fined $3,000 because his fishing boat tarp was non-compliant blue. Another family hit with landscaping violations for shrubs planted 5 years before Vanessa became president. An older widow fined repeatedly because her grandson parked a pickup truck in the driveway during Christmas week. She keeps changing interpretations, Megan said quietly. People pay because they're scared of liens. I flipped through the notices slowly. Everyone signed by Vanessa Crowley. Everyone vague enough to intimidate people without ever clearly citing authority. She tried this on you too? I asked. Megan nodded once. We paid $2,200 last year over mailbox violations that didn't even exist when we bought the house. I leaned back in the chair. The lake outside had gone quiet toward evening. Just dock chains knocking softly against metal posts. How many people know she's targeting me? Pretty much everybody. Anybody asking why. She says you refuse to cooperate with community oversight. Community oversight. Another made-up phrase dressed to sound official. Megan hesitated before speaking again. She also keeps talking about your cabin income. There it was. She knows how booked you are during summer. I stared at the notices in my hand. 10 cabins, full reservations through August. Boat rentals, fishing packages. The HOA didn't see a neighbor. They saw revenue outside their control. Megan lowered her voice. She thinks if she pressures you hard enough, you'll eventually sign management authority over to the board. I looked up sharply. What? She mentioned it at the last meeting. Said the HOA should oversee all lake rentals directly for liability purposes. Liability. Another useful word people hide greed behind. I stood and walked toward the office window, overlooking the road. A FedEx truck rolled through the pines toward the subdivision entrance. No slowdown, no gate, no public county sign. Just private asphalt crossing private land. The same asphalt Vanessa now claimed belonged to her HOA. You ever hear her mention the road specifically? I asked. Megan frowned. She calls it the Community Access Road. I nodded slowly. Of course she did. That's how people convince themselves ownership magically changes over time. Use different words long enough, and eventually they stop asking questions. Megan stood carefully. I shouldn't stay long. If she sees my car here, she'll what? She'll make our lives difficult. That answer bothered me more than the fines. Fear had become normal inside Lakeside Pines. I walked her to the door. Before leaving, she stopped beside the orange notice still hanging on Cabin 4's porch post. She really thinks she can take these from you. I looked at the sticker for a long second, then at the road. She's about to make a mistake she can't undo. Megan studied my face carefully like she was trying to decide whether I sounded confident or dangerous. Maybe both. After she drove away, I went back inside and opened the gray lockbox again. This time I pulled out the original license agreement and laid it flat beneath the desk lamp. Page 7. Highlighted clause. The language was brutally simple. Any governing entity claiming authority over Walker property immediately triggered termination review. Not lawsuit review. Not negotiation review. Termination. I picked up my phone and called Nathan again. She's escalating, I said. How bad? She's talking about management takeover now. A pause. Then, good. I rubbed my forehead. You keep saying that. Because every time she pushes harder, she builds your case for you. I looked again toward the orange notice outside. She's calling the road community infrastructure. Nathan actually laughed at that. Oh, Ethan, she really hasn't checked the filings, has she? No. Then don't interrupt her. I heard keyboard clicks on his end. She holding another HOA meeting soon? Friday night. Go, I frowned. You serious? Yes. And Ethan? What? Ask your questions in public. Outside, wind moved through the pines hard enough to rattle the porch lights. I stared at the highlighted clause beneath the lamp, then at the stack of HOA notices beside it, and slowly, for the first time since Vanessa arrived, I realized something important. I wasn't the one trapped. She was. Friday night, the parking lot outside the Lakeside Pines clubhouse was already full when I pulled in. SUVs, luxury pickups, golf carts lined beside the curb like people were showing up for entertainment instead of an HOA meeting. In a way, they were. The clubhouse sat uphill from the lake with wide windows facing the water. I could see silhouettes moving inside before I even shut my truck door. People talking, pointing, waiting. Word had spread fast. By the time I walked through the front doors, conversations started dying one table at a time. Not completely, just enough to feel it. Vanessa Crowley stood near the front podium in another navy blazer, clipboard tucked against her side like a shield. Tommy Briggs sat beside her at a folding table stacked with violation folders. Both of them looked prepared. Neither looked worried. That told me everything. They still had no idea. I took a seat near the back wall beside the coffee station and slipped my phone into my shirt pocket with the recording app already running. One-party consent state. Nathan made me double-check that twice. At exactly 7 o'clock, Vanessa stepped to the microphone. Thank you all for attending this emergency compliance session regarding unauthorized commercial activity affecting community standards. There were murmurs around the room. She clicked a remote. Pictures of my cabins appeared on the projector screen behind her. Cabin 4, the dock, the boat launch. Orange violation notices hanging on the porch posts. Tommy had even zoomed in on the cedar railing I'd been repairing Tuesday morning. Vanessa folded her hands calmly. These structures have operated outside HOA oversight for years, despite direct connection to Lakeside Pines infrastructure. Infrastructure. There was that word again. Repeated attempts at voluntary compliance have been ignored, she continued. The board is now pursuing full jurisdictional enforcement authority. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others nodded like they had no idea what any of it actually meant. Vanessa clicked to the next slide. A spreadsheet appeared. Projected cabin revenue estimates, occupancy percentages, seasonal rental totals. She was showing my business income to the room. Not exact numbers, close enough. The crowd reacted immediately. I heard whispers behind me. No wonder they want control. She's really going after him. Vanessa raised her voice slightly. Without oversight, unregulated rental activity exposes this community to liability risks and property devaluation. Liability, property values, community standards. 3 favorite weapons of every power-hungry HOA board in America. Then she looked directly at me. Mr. Walker has refused all cooperation. I stood slowly. The room quieted. Vanessa smiled tightly. Would you like to respond? Yes, I said calmly. Actually, I've got 3 questions. She crossed her arms. Go ahead. I kept my voice even. First question. Is the HOA formally claiming jurisdiction over my cabins? Yes, she answered immediately. Tommy wrote something down beside her. I nodded once. Second question. Does Lakeside Pines depend on the road crossing my property for subdivision access? She barely hesitated. The community access road, yes. Not my wording. Hers. I heard Nathan's voice in my head. Let her say it herself. I asked the third question slowly. Has the HOA reviewed the original recorded agreement allowing access over that road? That one finally caused hesitation. Vanessa's expression tightened just slightly. We don't need to review decades-old paperwork to enforce active community governance. A couple people nodded. Others looked confused. I stayed calm. So that's a no? Tommy leaned toward the microphone before Vanessa answered. The road has functioned as community infrastructure for over 14 years, again. Not my wording. His. I let silence sit there for a second. Long enough to make people uncomfortable. Vanessa mistook it for surrender. I saw it happen in real time. Her shoulders relaxed. She thought I was cornered. Mr. Walker, she said, voice softer now, the board is still willing to resolve this privately if you cooperate. What happens if I don't? Tommy slid a folder across the table dramatically. HOA liens begin Monday. Several people in the room murmured. Vanessa nodded once. And if necessary, enforcement actions involving county authorities will follow. There it was. Official, public, recorded. Everything Nathan told me to wait for. I sat back down without another word. That confused them more than arguing would have. Vanessa frowned slightly. You have nothing else to say? No, I answered calmly. The room stayed quiet. Then she smiled again. Confident, victorious. The kind of smile people wear right before walking across rotten floorboards. The meeting continued another 20 minutes, while residents argued about parking restrictions and marina fees, but none of it mattered anymore. The important part was already sitting in my shirt pocket. At 7:42, the meeting adjourned. People stood in clusters, talking quietly, while Vanessa stayed near the podium collecting papers. I headed for the exit. Halfway across the parking lot, Megan Pierce caught up with me. You okay? Fine. She thinks she won. I looked back through the clubhouse windows. Vanessa was laughing with Tommy near the projector screen. She did, I said quietly. Megan frowned. That doesn't sound good. It's great. I drove home with the windows down and the phone recording playing through the truck speakers. Every answer, every claim, every use of the phrase Community Access Road. By the time I reached Cabin 1, the lake had gone black under the night sky. I walked straight into the office, opened the gray lockbox, and laid the original road agreement beneath the desk lamp. Then I replayed Vanessa's answers one more time. Jurisdiction over my cabins. Community Access Road. No review of the original agreement. I turned slowly to page 7. The highlighted clause waited exactly where my father left it. License shall terminate immediately upon any claim of jurisdiction, ownership, or adverse interest against Walker family property by license or governing entity. I read it once, then twice. Then I leaned back in my father's chair and stared out toward the dark road beyond the cabins. Vanessa Crowley had just triggered the clause herself, and she'd done it on the record. Most people would moved immediately, filed something, threatened something, posted the recording online like gasoline thrown on a fire. I didn't. That was the first thing my father ever taught me about disputes involving land. The man who speaks first usually loses. So Saturday morning, I kept quiet. At 8:17, Megan Pierce texted me an address on Birch Lane with 4 words underneath. You need to hear this. Her kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink when I walked in. 5 people were already sitting around the table. Megan. An older couple I recognized from the marina. A younger Indian family from the subdivision's north side. And a guy in a Carhartt jacket with a laptop already open. Nobody smiled. Megan stood first. Thank you for coming. I nodded once and took the empty chair near the wall. The older man introduced himself as Harold Cooper. His wife Linda sat beside him, clutching a manila folder against her chest like it contained hospital results. Harold spoke first. We had a pontoon boat. I waited. Vanessa fined us because the tarp was the wrong shade of blue. I blinked. What? Linda opened the folder immediately. Inside were violation notices stacked almost an inch thick. Unapproved storage covering, repeated non-compliance, daily accumulating penalties. Everyone signed by Vanessa. She kept adding fines every month, Linda said quietly. We asked what color tarp was approved, and she never answered in writing. How much? Harold looked embarrassed, saying it. $9,400 for a tarp. I stared at the paperwork for a long second. What happened? We sold the boat. Silence settled over the room. Not dramatic silence, the tired kind. The kind people carry after losing something they know never should have been taken from them. I wrote the number down on a yellow legal pad. $19,400. No written rule. The younger couple went next. Raj and Anika Patel. They'd bought their house in Lakeside Pines 4 years earlier. Vanessa started citing them for non-compliant vegetation 18 months after moving in. Certain shrubs, certain flowers, tree placement violations, landscaping fines, $14,000 total. She said the subdivision had revised aesthetic standards, Raj explained. You ever see the revisions? He shook his head once. She refused to provide them. And you paid? Anika answered quietly. We refinanced our mortgage. That one hit harder than the TARP fines. Not because of the money, because people only refinance homes when fear gets bigger than logic. I wrote another note. $14,000. Rules never produced. The man with the laptop finally spoke. Mike Sanders. He turned the screen toward me. I handled team maintenance for the HOA management server until last winter. Folders filled the monitor. Invoices, board emails, payment logs. What am I looking at? Discretionary enforcement funds. Mike clicked open a spreadsheet. Rows of homeowner fines filled the screen. Thousands and thousands of dollars collected through violations. I scanned the totals quickly, nearly 180 grand over 2 years. Then Mike highlighted several outgoing payments. Halcyon Strategic Consulting, LC. I frowned. What's that? Megan answered before he could. Vanessa's brother-in-law. Mike nodded. $11,000 paid out last year alone. Consulting fees, no descriptions, no deliverables. Just money moving quietly out of HOA accounts. I leaned back slowly. There it was. The real machine underneath all the clipboard talk and compliance language. Pressure people, fine people, scare people, drain money. And now she wanted my cabins because she saw 10 more income streams outside her reach. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then Linda Cooper asked the question everybody in the room was thinking. What are you going to do? I looked around the table carefully before answering. Megan looked angry. Raj looked exhausted. Harold looked embarrassed. Mike looked nervous enough to regret bringing the laptop. These weren't revolutionaries. They were homeowners who got cornered one at a time until somebody finally pushed back. I'm going to make her put everything in writing, I said. Megan frowned. That's it? No, I answered calmly. That's how it starts. Mike slid a thumb drive across the table. Everything I copied is on there. I picked it up but didn't pocket it yet. You tell anybody else about this? No, good. Megan folded her arms. She's going to keep escalating, Ethan. I know. And if she files liens Monday? I looked toward the kitchen window, overlooking Birch Lane. 3 HOA residents drove past while we sat there. All using the same private road Vanessa claimed belonged to her subdivision. That irony was getting heavier every hour. I'm counting on it, I said. Nobody understood that answer except maybe Mike. His eyes narrowed slightly. You found something, didn't you? I looked at him for a second, then smiled just enough to avoid answering. By the time I got home that afternoon, the orange notices were still hanging on all 10 cabins. I left them there, evidence ages better untouched. Inside cabin 1, I spread everything across the office desk. The HOA notices, the recorded meeting transcript Nathan helped me prepare that morning, the road agreement, the highlighted clause, the witness statements Megan convinced everyone to write before I left. Then I pulled out a fresh yellow legal pad and started writing names. 1 through 96, every homeowner in Lakeside Pines. When I finished, I opened the bottom desk drawer and counted the stack of blank certified mail envelopes inside. 96 exactly. Outside, another SUV rolled down my road toward the subdivision. Then another and another. None of them knew yet that their HOA president had just endangered the only legal access to every house beyond the ridge. I looked down at the highlighted clause one more time, then at the empty envelopes. And slowly, piece by piece, the shape of the counterattack started coming together. Monday morning, Vanessa filed the liens. Nathan called me at 10:06 sharp. She did it. You get the filing? County website updated 20 minutes ago. Official jurisdiction claims attached to all 10 cabins. I leaned back in my father's chair slowly. That was the second trigger. Public filings, recorded authority claims. Exactly what the clause warned against. Nathan exhaled quietly into the phone. She's either unbelievably arrogant or unbelievably stupid. Probably both. You still waiting? Yes. Good. Let her keep moving. By Tuesday, fresh orange notices appeared on every cabin door. Final non-compliance warning. Tommy Briggs personally stapled half of them crooked. I knew because Lina called while he was still there. He's walking around like he owns the place, she whispered angrily over the phone. Don't confront him. I wasn't planning to. Good. The last thing I needed was Vanessa pretending somebody threatened her people. That afternoon, I installed extra cloud backups for the cabin security cameras. Not because I expected trouble, because I knew Vanessa was running out of patience, and desperate people stop thinking about consequences. Thursday morning proved me right. I was 30 minutes outside Grand Junction buying replacement dock hardware when Lena called screaming. Ethan. I pulled the truck onto the shoulder immediately. What happened? There are men at the cabins changing locks. Every muscle in my shoulders tightened. Who? That Tommy guy. Vanessa, too. They brought contractors. I looked at the dashboard clock. 9:18 a.m. You stay in your car, I said instantly. Do not argue with anybody. They told me the property's under HOA management now. Lena. My voice cut through hers hard enough to stop the panic. Listen carefully. Stay inside your car. Doors locked. I'm on my way. I hung up and turned the truck around. Didn't speed. Wanted every second after this clean and legal. When I reached the property at 10 peso 2, the first thing I saw was a pile of drilled-out deadbolts sitting in the gravel outside cabin 3. The second thing I saw was Tommy Briggs laughing beside a contractor van. Vanessa stood nearby in sunglasses, holding a clipboard while the contractor installed a fresh brass lock onto cabin 5. Like they were renovating vacation property they already owned. Lena's hatchback sat near the dock, with the engine still running. I parked beside it and stepped out slowly. Nobody smiled this time. Tommy noticed me first. Well, he called out loudly. There he is. The contractor stopped drilling. Vanessa turned toward me without removing her sunglasses. Mr. Walker, she said calmly. These cabins are now under temporary compliance control pending HOA review. I looked past her at the fresh lock on cabin 5. Then at the yellow seizure notices taped to 4 cabin doors, property access suspended. My pulse slowed instead of speeding up. That usually meant I was angry enough to think clearly. You changed my locks. Tommy folded his arms. You've ignored repeated HOA directives. I glanced toward the roofline of cabin 3, small black security camera mounted beneath the gutter. Then cabin 5, another camera. Then cabin 7, another. 4 angles, HD recording, cloud storage, timestamped. Vanessa followed my eyes upward. And for the first time since stepping onto my property, uncertainty crossed her face. Just for a second. Then it disappeared. We're authorized to secure non-compliant structures, she said. No, I answered calmly. You're not. Tommy stepped closer like he wanted the confrontation. Actually, according to the liens don't transfer ownership. Silence. The contractor slowly lowered his drill. I took my phone out and dialed the county sheriff's non-emergency number without breaking eye contact with Vanessa. Tommy scoffed. You calling the cops on yourself now? I ignored him, the dispatcher answered. I gave my name, property address, and one sentence. I'm the legal owner of 10 cabins on Walker Lake Road, and unauthorized individuals are actively changing locks on my property without a court order. Vanessa's jaw tightened immediately. The dispatcher asked if the parties were still present. Yes. Deputies on the way. Tommy looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked at me. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Then she tried confidence again. You're making this more difficult than necessary. I almost laughed at that. You trespassed onto private property and drilled locks off occupied rental cabins. We have enforcement authority. No, I said quietly. You have a clipboard. That one landed harder than yelling would have. The contractor suddenly looked very interested in packing up his tools. 28 minutes later, Deputy Cole Mercer rolled onto the property in a sheriff's Tahoe. He stepped out already serious. Cole knew me, knew my father too. He looked once at the drilled-out locks lying in the gravel, then at the fresh hardware on the cabin doors, then at Vanessa. "What exactly is going on here?" Vanessa moved fast. "Deputy, this property falls under active HOA enforcement and—" Cole held up a hand immediately. "Do you have a court order?" "Silence," Tommy answered instead. "We filed liens Monday." Cole stared at him flatly. "That wasn't my question." Vanessa finally removed her sunglasses. "No formal court order yet." Cole nodded once slowly, then turned toward me. "You the deeded owner?" "Yes." "Can you prove it?" I walked into cabin 1 and returned with the original property deed and tax records already copied in a folder. Cole read them carefully. Then he looked up at Vanessa again. "You can't forcibly secure somebody else's structures without a court order." Tommy tried interrupting. "They're under HOA jurisdiction." Cole cut him off harder this time. "I don't care what your HOA thinks." That shut him up. The deputy walked toward cabin 3, examined the drilled-out deadbolt lying in the dirt, then activated his body camera. "Here's what's gonna happen," he said calmly. "You're going to remove every lock you installed today and leave this property immediately." Vanessa folded her arms. "We have legal standing." Cole looked directly at her. "And if you come back without a signed court order, you'll have criminal trespassing problems too." That finally cracked something. Not fear, humiliation. The contractor removed the new locks in complete silence while Tommy loaded tools back into the van. Vanessa never spoke another word, but before leaving she looked back at me from beside the Cadillac. Not confident anymore, not victorious, just angry, the dangerous kind. I watched the SUV disappear down the road. Then I looked up toward the security cameras mounted above the cabins. Every second recorded, every lock, every threat, every illegal entry. Deputy Mercer handed me a case number before leaving. "You planning to use this?" I looked toward the road winding through the pines. "Oh yeah," I said quietly. "I definitely am." Deputy Cole Mercer studied my face for a second, like he was deciding whether to ask another question. Then he handed me the incident report card. Case number written across the bottom in black ink. "Keep copies of everything," he said. "Already doing it." He nodded once and headed back toward the Tahoe. The second his cruiser disappeared down the road, I walked straight into cabin 1 and locked the office door behind me. Then I pulled the camera footage up on my laptop. 4 screens, 4 angles. Vanessa standing beside cabin 5 with her arms folded while the contractor drilled out my lock. Tommy taping seizure notices onto cabin doors. The exact timestamps, the audio, every second clean. I backed the files up 3 different ways. Laptop, external drive, cloud storage. Then I called Nathan. She crossed the line. How bad? She physically seized cabins. Silence. Then tell me you recorded it. Every second, I heard him exhale sharply. "Oh, that's beautiful." Deputy Mercer forced them off the property. "That's even better." I replayed the footage again while we talked. Vanessa looked different on camera now. Not powerful. Reckless. People like her always believed authority protected them from consequences. Right up until paperwork showed otherwise. Nathan's keyboard clicked rapidly over the phone. She filed a second jurisdiction claim this morning. I stopped replaying the footage. What? County site updated 20 minutes ago. Expanded enforcement request tied to the cabins. I smiled slowly. There it was. The final trigger. Public. Recorded. Undeniable. Nathan lowered his voice. "You ready?" I looked toward the bottom desk drawer. 96 empty certified envelopes waiting inside. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I think I am." The next call went to Rachel Sloan, best land rights attorney in western Colorado. Expensive, precise, and absolutely ruthless once somebody lied on paper. She arrived at the cabins 2 hours later in a dusty silver Tacoma, carrying a leather briefcase thick enough to stop bullets. Rachel didn't waste time with greetings. Show me everything. So I did. The road agreement. Page 7. The HOA notices. The recorded meeting transcript. Deputy Mercer's incident report. The security footage. Vanessa's lien filings. Mike Sanders' HOA payment spreadsheets. Rachel spent almost 40 minutes reading without speaking once. Then she leaned back in my father's chair and removed her glasses slowly. Well, she said calmly, this woman just detonated her own subdivision. That was the first time anybody besides Nathan fully understood the scale of what Vanessa had done. Rachel tapped the highlighted clause. She thinks this road belongs to the HOA through implied community use. Yep, she's wrong, I know. No, Rachel corrected quietly. She's catastrophically wrong. That wording mattered. There's a difference between losing a legal dispute and destroying the legal foundation underneath 96 homes. Vanessa had managed both. Rachel closed the file carefully. When do you want to move? Soon, not soon, she said. Precisely. That sounded like something my father would have respected. She pointed toward the stack of blank envelopes. You notify every homeowner simultaneously. No leaks beforehand. No warning to the HOA board. I already printed the address list. Good. Rachel opened her briefcase and pulled out fresh legal stationery. We include 4 things in every envelope. She started counting on her fingers. First, formal notice of road license revocation. Second finger. Second, copies of Vanessa Crowley's recorded jurisdiction claims. Third, the highlighted clause proving her actions triggered termination. Fourth, and finally, the sheriff incident report involving unlawful cabin seizure activity. I looked at her carefully. You really think this blows up that fast? Rachel almost smiled. Ethan, by this time tomorrow, 96 homeowners are going to realize their HOA president may have endangered the only legal access to every property inside Lakeside Pines. Outside the office window, another homeowner drove down the road toward the subdivision entrance. Normal speed, normal day, no clue the legal ground under their tires was collapsing, Rachel continued. You don't threaten anybody. You don't posture. You simply inform them of the legal consequences their board created. That part mattered. This wasn't revenge. Not really. It was correction. Vanessa built her authority on intimidation because she assumed nobody understood the documents better than she did. Turns out she never understood the documents at all. Rachel stood and closed the briefcase. One more thing. What? When these letters go out, don't speak publicly. I frowned slightly. Why? Because panic will do your work for you. By Friday morning, Cabin 1 looked like a mailroom. Stacks of printed notices covered the dining table, certified mail receipts, copies of the original road agreement, Deputy Mercer's report. Each envelope addressed individually by homeowner name. 96 total. Lena stopped helping halfway through because she kept rereading the highlighted clause. They really could lose access to the subdivision. If the revocation completes, yes. She stared at me. All because Vanessa wanted your cabins, pretty much. Lena shook her head slowly. That woman's crazy. No, I said quietly. She just thought nobody would push back. At 3:40 that afternoon, Rachel called from the county clerk's office. It's official. What is? Vanessa filed another amended claim 20 minutes ago. I looked at the stack of envelopes beside me. That was it. Everything documented. Everything triggered. Everything recorded cleanly enough to survive court. I loaded all 96 envelopes into the truck just before sunset. The cardboard banker's box barely fit across the passenger seat. As I pulled onto the road toward town, homeowners passed me heading home for the weekend, waving casually, completely unaware. By Monday morning, every one of them would open a certified envelope explaining exactly what their HOA president had done. And for the first time since this started, I realized the real fight was no longer between me and Vanessa Crowley. And for the first time since this started, I realized the real fight was no longer between me and Vanessa Crowley. It was between Vanessa and the entire neighborhood she'd just put at risk. The certified letters hit Lakeside Pines Monday morning. By 9:15, my phone started ringing. Not from Vanessa, from homeowners. The first call came from an older man named Walter Green, who lived near the subdivision entrance. His voice sounded tight. "Mr. Walker, is this letter real?" "Yes." Long silence. "Then the HOA never owned the road?" "No." Another silence. "My wife's freaking out." "I understand," he lowered his voice. "What happens in 30 days? That depends on whether the HOA fixes what it caused." He thanked me quietly and hung up. The second call came 3 minutes later. Then another. Then 5 more. By noon, my voicemail was full. Some people were angry, some terrified, most confused. Nobody had ever questioned the road before, because nobody imagined the HOA president could be reckless enough to trigger revocation of the only legal access into the subdivision. But now they had paperwork, official filings, highlighted clauses, Deputy Mercer's incident report, and suddenly the panic became real. At 1:07, Megan Pierce sent me screenshots from the Lakeside Pines neighborhood Facebook page. The first post read, "Is this true? Can the road actually be closed?" 200 comments underneath. People tagging lawyers. People demanding emergency meetings. People asking why the board never disclosed the road agreement. Then came the real shift. Somebody uploaded Vanessa's lien filing directly into the group. Another homeowner uploaded my certified notice beside it, side by side, cause and effect. The comments exploded. She did this herself. Why didn't the board review the road contract? You put all our homes at risk over cabins. By 3 o'clock, Megan texted again. 3 board members left the Facebook group entirely. That meant things were getting ugly. I stayed quiet. Exactly like Rachel told me to. No interviews, no online arguments, no statements, just documents doing their work. At 4:40, a black Lexus stopped outside cabin 1. An older woman stepped out clutching one of the certified envelopes. Helen Morris, retired schoolteacher, lived in Lakeside Pines since the late 90s. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Mr. Walker," I stepped onto the porch. She held up the envelope with shaking hands. "My husband's in assisted living in Denver," she said quietly. "This house is all I have left. I understand. Can they really lose road access?" "The HOA triggered a revocation clause," I answered carefully. "The legal notice period has started." Tears filled her eyes instantly. "All because of Vanessa?" I didn't answer that directly. Didn't need to. The paperwork already had. Helen looked back toward the road winding into the subdivision. "She told us you were trying to avoid community rules." I almost smiled. "She also told people the road belonged to the HOA. Helen stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded, like a person realizing they'd trusted the wrong voice for too long. By sunset, 3 more homeowners had shown up at the cabins, asking questions. None hostile, all nervous. One younger couple asked whether their mortgage could collapse if access rights disappeared. Another wanted to know if emergency vehicles could still enter after revocation. A contractor asked if title insurance covered road access disputes. The fear was spreading beyond anger now. Financial fear, property value fear, foreclosure fear. The kind that turns neighborhoods against leadership fast. At 7:12 that evening, Vanessa finally posted publicly. Megan screenshotted it immediately. Lakeside Pines HOA is actively resolving misinformation regarding temporary access concerns. Residents should remain calm while legal counsel addresses Mr. Walker's retaliatory actions. Retaliatory actions. That one irritated me enough to laugh. She'd illegally seized my cabins 4 days earlier, and still thought she controlled the narrative. The comments underneath turned brutal almost immediately. "Did you or did you not file claims against his property? Why? Didn't you review the agreement first? You told us the road was community property. My realtor says this could freeze sales. The post disappeared 27 minutes later, too late. Screenshots already everywhere. At 8:30, Rachel Sloan called. How bad is it? Neighborhood meltdown. Good. You sound happy. I'm practical, she corrected. Pressure creates settlements. I walked down toward the dock while we talked. Lights glowed across the lake from the subdivision beyond the ridge. 96 homes. 96 families suddenly realizing their HOA president might jeopardize the legal access beneath every tire that crossed my land. Rachel's voice sharpened slightly. Has Vanessa contacted you yet? No. She will. What's her move now? She'll try confidence first. Then intimidation, then panic. I stopped near the boat ramp. And after that? Rachel answered immediately. Court. Tuesday morning proved her right. At exactly 9:02, a county process server walked onto my property carrying a thick envelope. Official hearing notice. Vanessa had filed emergency action requests through county court, seeking immediate enforcement authority over all 10 cabins before the revocation period could take effect. I signed for the documents calmly, then looked at the hearing date stamped across the top. Thursday. 2 days away, Vanessa wasn't backing down. Even now, even after the neighborhood panic, even after the recordings, even after the sheriff report, she still thought pressure could overpower paperwork. I called Rachel immediately. She filed. I know, Rachel answered. I already downloaded it. You sound calm. I am calm. That caught my attention. Why? Because, Ethan, she said quietly. She just walked into court, still believing she's the one with leverage. I looked down at the hearing notice in my hand, then toward the road disappearing through the trees. And for the first time since this started, I realized Thursday wasn't going to be a legal argument. It was going to be a public collapse. The courthouse parking lot was already crowded when I arrived Thursday afternoon. News traveled fast in small Colorado lake towns, especially when 96 homeowners suddenly thought they might lose access to their own neighborhood. I spotted 3 Lakeside Pines residents standing near the entrance holding copies of the certified letters. Another group stood beside the courthouse steps arguing quietly while checking phones. Nobody looked calm anymore. Inside courtroom 3B, Vanessa Crowley sat at the plaintiff's table in another tailored navy blazer with a contract attorney beside her flipping through folders. Tommy Briggs sat behind them stiff as a fence post. Vanessa looked confident again, too confident. That was the problem with people who confuse authority with ownership. They think volume beats documentation. Rachel Sloan walked in beside me carrying 2 bankers' boxes full of files. No smile, no greeting, just business. You ready? She asked quietly. Yep, good. Let her lawyer talk first. We sat at the defense table while residents slowly filled the gallery seats behind us. I recognized Megan Pierce near the back wall, Walter Green, Helen Morris. Half the subdivision looked like they hadn't slept in 2 days. At exactly 2 p.m., Judge Robert Tanaka entered the courtroom. Late 60s, sharp eyes, no wasted movement. The kind of judge who already knew when people were bluffing before they opened their mouths. Everybody stood, then sat. Vanessa's attorney rose immediately. Your Honor, Lakeside Pines HOA seeks emergency enforcement authority regarding ongoing non-compliant commercial structures adversely affecting community property values and subdivision governance. Rachel didn't move, didn't interrupt, exactly like she planned. The attorney continued for nearly 10 minutes. Community infrastructure, shared access, public reliance, emergency management concerns. Every argument depended on the assumption that the road legally belonged to the HOA through long-term use. Judge Tanaka listened without expression. Then he looked toward Rachel. Defense. Rachel stood calmly and carried 3 folders to the bench. Your Honor, before addressing any compliance allegations, The defense requests the court review the underlying access agreement governing Lakeside Pines subdivision. Judge Tanaka opened the first folder. Original deed, recorded county plat, Walker ownership filings dating back to 1982. The second folder contained the road agreement, the revocable license, highlighted clause on page 7. I watched the judge's eyes stop halfway through the paragraph, then return to the beginning. He read it again, slowly. Rachel spoke clearly into the silence. The subdivision does not possess an easement, Your Honor. It possesses a revocable access license contingent upon non-interference with Walker family property. Vanessa's attorney frowned immediately. Rachel continued. On multiple occasions, the HOA formally asserted jurisdictional authority over Mr. Walker's cabins and land. Those actions triggered automatic revocation provisions contained in the recorded agreement. The courtroom shifted, not loudly. Just people sitting straighter. Judge Tanaka looked toward Vanessa's attorney. Counselor, were you aware this was a revocable license rather than an easement? That question landed like a hammer. The attorney hesitated, and that hesitation told everybody in the room the answer. No, Your Honor. Vanessa turned toward him sharply. What do you mean, no? He ignored her completely. Rachel opened the third folder. Inside were the meeting transcript, Deputy Mercer's incident report, and still photographs from the cabin security footage. One image showed Vanessa standing beside cabin 5 while contractors drilled out my locks, arms folded, watching. Judge Tanaka studied the photograph for several seconds, then looked at Vanessa. Did your association physically alter locks on property you did not own? Vanessa finally stood. We were enforcing community compliance standards. That is not what I asked. Silence. Rachel stepped in calmly. The HOA also filed multiple jurisdictional claims with the county recorder's office, Your Honor. Those filings formally activated revocation language under the original road agreement. Judge Tanaka leaned back slowly. How many homes rely on this road for legal access? 96, Rachel answered. The courtroom went completely still. Not dramatic, not gasping. Just the heavy silence of people realizing the ground beneath them suddenly mattered. Vanessa finally lost control of her expression. This is retaliation, she snapped. He's threatening an entire community over cabins. No, Rachel corrected calmly. Your board endangered the community when it attempted to seize property it did not own. Vanessa's attorney looked physically sick now. He turned toward her and whispered something sharp enough that even Tommy looked uncomfortable. Judge Tanaka raised one hand. Enough. The room froze again. He looked directly at Vanessa. Your association claimed ownership authority over property outside its legal control without reviewing the governing access agreement first. Vanessa tried recovering. The road has functioned as community property for years. Judge Tanaka cut her off immediately. Use does not equal ownership. That line hit the gallery like a shotgun blast. Helen Morris covered her mouth with one hand. Walter Green shook his head slowly. Tommy Briggs stared at the table. Rachel slid one final document toward the bench. Formal revocation notice. Certified mailing receipts attached behind it. 96 homeowners have already been notified, she said quietly. The revocation period is currently active. Vanessa's attorney stood quickly. Your Honor, the HOA would like to withdraw all jurisdictional claims pending further review. There it was. The collapse. Fast. Public. Complete. Judge Tanaka looked unimpressed. Denied for now. Vanessa went pale. The judge continued reading silently for another 30 seconds before finally speaking again. This court finds the HOA acted beyond verified legal authority regarding the Walker cabins and associated land claims. Every word landed heavier than the last. The emergency enforcement request is denied. Vanessa shut her eyes briefly. Judge Tanaka kept going. All liens and jurisdictional filings against Mr. Walker's cabins are to be suspended pending formal review. Then he looked directly at me. Mr. Walker, are you currently attempting to block subdivision access? I stood slowly. No, Your Honor. Do you intend to? I thought carefully before answering. I intend to enforce the agreement exactly as written. Judge Tanaka held my gaze for a long second, then nodded once. That is your legal right. The hearing ended 9 minutes later. But nobody moved immediately, because everybody in that courtroom understood something now. The road was real, the clause was real, and Vanessa Crowley had triggered both herself. As people slowly filed out, I watched her remain frozen at the plaintiff's table while her attorney spoke rapidly beside her. For the first time since she drove onto my property in that Cadillac, she finally looked exactly what she was. Not powerful, not untouchable. Just a woman who never bothered to read the paperwork. The courthouse hallway emptied slowly after the hearing. Nobody from Lakeside Pines looked at Vanessa anymore. That was the first thing I noticed. Not anger, not yelling. Distance. People moved around her like she carried something contagious. Megan Pierce caught up with me near the exit doors, holding a stack of papers against her chest. You were right, she said quietly. I know, she never read the agreement. No, I answered. She just assumed nobody else had either. Behind us, Vanessa's attorney walked past carrying 2 bankers' boxes full of files without saying a word to her. That told me plenty. Lawyers don't abandon confident clients in public hallways. Rachel Sloan stepped beside me. Don't celebrate yet. I'm not. She's still dangerous. I looked through the courthouse glass toward the parking lot. Vanessa stood beside her Cadillac, speaking rapidly into her phone, with one hand pressed against her forehead. For the first time since this started, she looked overwhelmed. Not defeated, not yet, but close enough to smell it. The real collapse started 4 days later. Tuesday morning, the Lakeside Pines HOA scheduled an emergency board meeting. Residents packed the clubhouse before sunrise. Megan texted updates while I worked on the dock outside cabin 6. 8:14 a.m. People demanding resignations. 8:31 a.m. Someone leaked the sheriff report. 8:42 a.m. They're arguing about the consulting payments now. That last one mattered. Mike Sanders finally released the HOA financial spreadsheets publicly after Rachel confirmed the court filings protected him. By noon, copies of payment transfers between the HOA and Halcyon Strategic Consulting were all over the neighborhood Facebook page. $11,000. No clear services, no contracts. Just money flowing into a company tied directly to Vanessa's brother-in-law. Residents who ignored the cabin fight suddenly started paying attention, because greed always gets more attention than power. At 2:17 that afternoon, Megan sent one final message. Vanessa resigned. I stared at the screen for a long second, then set the phone down beside the toolbox. No victory speech, no dramatic reaction, just quiet. The kind that comes after pressure finally breaks something. 2 more board members resigned before sunset. Tommy Briggs disappeared completely. Nobody in the subdivision heard from him again after the hearing. By Friday, state investigators formally requested HOA financial records tied to discretionary enforcement funds. Rachel called me, laughing softly. She's done. You sure? Ethan, they're auditing 4 years of fines. That would bury her faster than the road dispute ever could, because homeowners might forgive arrogance. They never forgive stolen money. A week later, 3 members of a temporary HOA committee came down my road together. Megan Pierce, Walter Green, and Helen Morris. Different energy this time. No clipboards, no threats, no Cadillac. Walter removed his hat before speaking. We'd like to talk. I motioned toward the porch outside cabin 1. We sat overlooking the lake while renters unloaded kayaks farther down the dock. Megan spoke first. The neighborhood voted to remove the remaining board. I nodded once. Walter slid a folder across the table. Inside was a formal request to negotiate permanent access rights correctly this time. Real easement terms, recorded boundaries, mutual maintenance responsibilities. No jurisdiction claims over my land, no authority over the cabins, no ambiguous language, just honest paperwork. I flipped through the pages slowly. You had a lawyer draft this? Yes, Helen answered carefully. One who actually read the original agreement. That almost made me smile. Walter leaned forward. Most people in that subdivision had no idea your father built this road himself. He never cared whether people knew. Well, Walter said quietly. They know now. The lake stayed quiet for a minute except for water tapping softly against the dock posts. Finally, Megan asked the question everybody had been waiting on. Are you really going to shut the road down? I looked toward the trees where the asphalt disappeared uphill into lakeside pines. 96 homes, families, kids, people who never actually did anything to me besides trust the wrong leadership. No, I said. Relief hit all three of them immediately. But the new agreement gets done correctly, I continued. And if another HOA board ever tries claiming my property again, the easement terminates automatically. Walter nodded before I even finished. Fair. Also, I added, the cabins stay completely independent from HOA oversight forever. Done, Megan said instantly. That part mattered to me more than money ever did. The cabins were my father's life. His fingerprints were still buried in half the woodwork around the property. Nobody with a clipboard was ever taking them. 3 weeks later, the new easement finalized through county recording. Properly filed, properly worded, permanent legal access for the subdivision, permanent legal protection for my land. Exactly the way it should have been handled from the beginning. The same afternoon, the paperwork cleared. I walked back to cabin 4 carrying a scraper and a heat gun. The original orange violation notice still hung crooked on the porch post, where Tommy Briggs slapped it weeks earlier. Sun faded now, edges curling. I stared at it for a long second. Code violation pending compliance review. Funny thing about paper, it only matters when the person holding it actually understands the law behind it. I peeled the sticker slowly off the cedar post. The adhesive fought me halfway down before finally releasing all at once. Then I dropped it into the trash barrel beside the workshop. After that, I picked up the cedar baluster I'd been installing the morning. Vanessa first drove onto my property. The unfinished one still leaned exactly where I left it. I slid it into place carefully and drove the final screws home. Solid, level, finished. By sunset, renters were back on the docks fishing quietly beside the lake. Kids riding bicycles down the gravel paths. Kayaks tied along the shoreline again. Normal life returning piece by piece. I stood on the porch outside cabin 4 with my hands in my pockets watching headlights move slowly through the trees toward lakeside pines. Cars using the same road they'd always used. The only difference now was that everybody finally understood whose land carried them home. And honestly, that was all I ever wanted.
You know, if there's one thing this homemade taught me, is that a piece of land means more than dirt, fences, or paperwork. It's how the years people poured into it. My father didn't build that broad so somebody could control other people with it someday. He built it so family could get some safely. And the truth is, most problems like this don't start because people are evil. They start because somebody gets comfortable with power and stop respecting limits. What mattered in the end wasn't humiliating anybody or getting the last word. It was making sure the truth stayed where it belonged, on paper, in the open, where nobody could twist it later. That's why keeping records matter, that's why standing calm matters, and that's why decisions usually last longer than anger. If you ever deal with an HOA or a property dispute, or somebody trying to push you around just because they thought you couldn't fight back, go ahead and type stand your brow down in the comments. And I read more of this than you probably think, and I know a lot of folks out there have started their own. And if story like this means something to you, story about quiet courage, common sense, and people standing firm without losing themselves, subscribe and stick around. There's plenty more down this road.